If you find yourself on a lonely stretch of road between Tampa and Daytona on Florida's I-4 corridor, you may have just entered into what has become known as the dead zone. This zone has become nefarious, dubious, and perhaps deadly for a lot of reasons. One must track the history back to the 1870s when real estate tycoon Henry Sanford decided to try to create a great location for immigrant German families to live. He sold 640 acres to these immigrants, who founded what would become known as St. Joseph's Catholic Colony. The conditions were difficult, being essentially swampy land. Disease began to be everywhere. People died at a rapid rate. And then in 1887, a case of yellow fever sprung up that essentially decimated St. Joseph's. And that was it. The town was gone. The people took their dead, buried them in the woods, and moved on about their lives. And as usual in these situations, land changed hands, and then again and again and again, numerous times over the next few years. Until finally, the state of Florida decided it was time to build an interstate, I-4. They began to buy up the land, and though there was talk of moving the bodies, apparently it was forgotten. And so concrete and asphalt began to be laid over the graves of these German immigrant settlers. People began to talk of a curse, that strange things happened in this region. But of course, rationally minded people began to dismiss this. This is nothing. The highway goes up. Traffic begins to move over what became known, not affectionately, as the Field of the Dead. And then, in 1960, nature decided to confirm that something was in fact amiss in the dead zone. Hurricane Donna changed course and headed directly for I-4, leaving a path of destruction that made even the most skeptical think that perhaps the dead zone was true. Welcome to Urban Legends Unmasked. I'm your host, Chad Lerman. Okay, when it came time for Florida, I knew that this was going to be a daunting and perhaps overwhelming endeavor to try to find the creepiest urban legend in all of Florida. Because let's be honest, Florida is honestly a walking urban legend. The Florida man thing, there's alligators, there's all these different things that occur within the cities. It's just a crazy, crazy place. I mean, they've got everything from Disney World to Universal Studios to Miami. They've got the Everglades, they've got all these different things, and in the midst of it, you've got all sorts of craziness that goes on in this particular state. So Florida it's got a lot of stuff. I looked at some different things. The Florida skunk ape was a fun one. Yeah, that was an interesting one. I feel a little too Bigfooty there, so I didn't want to mess with that one. So the more I looked into the I-4 corridor, the dead zone, if you will, the more I began to realize that this had potential. Now, I'll tell you at the outset that part of the reason why I am drawn to this particular legend is it's very similar to some situations where I grew up. I grew up in a very small town, and like the I-4, an exorbitant amount of loss and death in the region. So I think that for me, what draws me to I-4 is this idea that some places are just dark. That some places have this really negative, deadly, if you will, energy to them. And I think that that's something that it's ancient. It's sort of primal in us. If you go back to reading some of the things that archaeologists have found about ancient civilizations, they believe that some places had good energy and some places had bad energy. And one of the more common ways in which you can just manifest bad energy, build something over a grave. pretty quick. Now, here's what we know about I-4, and I'm going to give you some actual statistics, some actual things. According to Positively Osceola, a study was done which determined that a study by Teletrack, the study was done in April 17th, 2021. And so basically it says that Teletrack, I-4 between Tampa and Daytona Beach, okay, so where we're talking about this dead zone, is the deadliest stretch of highway in the whole United States. The whole thing, okay? So it shows that the number of deaths per mile, the most common months, days, and time for fatal accidents are coming up to occur. And here's what's interesting to me. This was the statistic that really just jumped out to me, that this range is about 132 miles. And there are between 2016 and 2019, 150 deaths, which averages out to about 1 death per mile. Actually, it's a little more than 1 death per mile on this road. That is a lot of deaths in a short amount of time. And actually, that's like slowing it down. Apparently, it used to, up until 2016, it had been much more frequent for there to be deaths on that particular road. Now, that's bad, okay? Like, deaths are bad. But let's throw in the supernatural element of it too, that people oftentimes will report seeing things along the road. Perhaps they'll end up seeing things like a spectral entity, okay? So your typical ghost hitchhiker walking along the side of the road. Another thing, very, very similar to our intro music that we have for Urban Legends Unmasked, the idea of static, that things cut into and out of as truckers are driving through. Their CB radios will blast with static as they're driving through this region. Also seeing, just images, things that occur along this road. But the thing that really, there's a lot of different scientific explanations for why there can be staticky radios or why you might think you see phantom hitchhikers on the side of the road. But the thing that jumps out to me, the thing that can't be denied, is that statistically more people die on this 132-mile stretch of road than any other stretch of road in the entire country, okay? Now, what does it look like? Like, that's going to be my first question. Is this road truly haunted, or is this a road that's just built for death? You know, there are some highways that just aren't built very well. There's roads, there's lots of blind turns, blind corners. There's a lot of entrances in unsafe manners. And so there's a lot of different reasons why it might be a deadly stretch of road that has nothing to do with the supernatural, nothing to do with the legends. So let's kind of like look at a description of what the road actually kind of looks like. So when one pulls up a map of the I-4, which I'm doing right now, you can see that it's honestly a fairly straight stretch of road. Like, there's a few bends and there's a few turns here and there, but it's a pretty straight stretch of road. So it's not that there's a lot of blind turns. It's not perhaps that there's a lot of things there. Now, maybe there's construction. One article that I read from one of the local news things there in Orlando basically says that, yeah, it's been under construction a lot in the last few years, and that could contribute to it. So that's a factor. Like, perhaps construction is a factor. I know here where I live, we're not too far from I-35. I-35 has a lot of accidents as well, largely because massive amounts of construction are occurring. So those are real life factors, things that could really contribute to it. But there is a flip side. Okay, so maybe there's not a lot of turns, maybe there's not a lot of blind corners and those kind of typical things, a lot of entrances to the interstate that would make it a dangerous place. The other factor may be the fact that it is straight. You know, that when you have a long straight stretch of highway, pretty unencumbered by turns or a lot of entrances, people may, ramp the speed up. So maybe the reason why there's so many accidents, and especially fatalities involved in these accidents, might be that people are speeding along the highway. Can't really find a lot of data, trying to find some different things. There's not much to speak of on that side. So I do want to say, before I dive into why I think, if anything that we've talked about on Urban Legends Unmasked has been supernatural, this might be one of the big ones that I think is true. The reason why I think that can happen is I do think that perhaps people drive recklessly there. Also, Florida has a big problem with drugs. I mean, right now in America, what state doesn't? But you do have an influx of drugs there. You do have people perhaps that are driving under like different sort of inebriations, under different influences. And again, Florida is kind of like crazy. There's some weird stuff that goes on there. I don't think you have to remember too far back to think about the guy who had gotten high off of bath salts and began to eat someone's face on the highway. That might have been the I-4 too. I'm not really sure. But if it is, that's not supernatural. That's just drugs. Don't do drugs, kids. So the point being that things happen in Florida. I think people are drawn there. It is a vacation spot. You are talking about a stretch of highway that's connecting areas that are, near Walt Disney. You're near beaches. You're near locations where college students migrate to for spring break. There's a lot of different other factors that could be very human and very normal, if not tragic, to explain why this place is so deadly. Why the dead zone is the dead zone. But I want to step back and I want to talk about this idea that there had been a settlement and many people died. And then those people's sacred resting places were covered over by an interstate where families and college students and vacationers are going to be driving rapidly over to get to and from different locations for them to celebrate, never really recognizing or realizing that bodies lie beneath them. Now, that's an eerie thing. I remember swimming one time in a lake. There's a man-made lake that they had dammed up a river in order to create this lake. Well, the year that they dammed it up, there were all like an amazing amount of rainstorms, and so they didn't really get a chance to demolish all the things that were in this low-lying man-made lake area. So as we're in this lake and I'm water skiing and waterboarding over the water, I'm fully aware that there are ruined structures 20 or 30 feet below the water surface where I am. And that creeped me out, just knowing that there were those things there. There have been legends and stories before of times where, in a similar situation, rivers were dammed up, flooding occurred, and bodies were not able to be retrieved from a cemetery in time, and eventually those bodies floated to the surface. So like there's something creepy about that idea, about the dead literally coming back to visit you, that fit with this story. Now, the idea that this stretch of road is haunted or perhaps cursed, maybe cursed is a better way to put it. I think there's something to be said for, we want to make sense of why so many people will die in a relatively small region. And again, it becomes very easy to explain things when you're talking about people driving 30 or 40 miles over the speed limit, driving recklessly, speedily, driving under the influence. Like those kind of things make sense when you have a high traffic area like I-4 is. I don't know what the numbers are on how many people travel that road, but 150 deaths is a lot of deaths. Even as I'm looking at the map right now, there's an accident listed on the live screen of the map. So it's going to happen. Like accidents happen on highways. But what do you think? Do you think that there are some places that are just bad? We talked about this a little bit a couple weeks back in Riverdale Road in Colorado, where there seemed to be a lot of really dark things happening in a very small stretch of road. And I pretty much kind of said there, hey, I think some places are just bad. Some places have a bad energy. And if I-4 is one of them, 132 miles of bad energy, I don't really need to go there. Although I am looking at this and seeing that Disney's right there along I-4. So that changes things a bit. Maybe I'll risk it for Disney. I don't know. But the point being, I do believe that there are some places that give off a bad energy. And so I want to tell a little personal story, and it's not about the I-4, but it does relate because we are talking about an area that has an exorbitantly high amount of traffic fatalities and accidents. I grew up in a small town in Central Texas called Mart, Texas. Mart has a population to this day of right around 2,000 people. It's not a very large town. My high school graduating class, I had 44 people. While I was in high school, we were larger than the school is now, I believe. And we had about 230 kids from freshman year through senior year. So 4 grades, 230 kids, a little bit less than, probably about 55 average kids per class. from my freshman year of high school until my freshman year of college, so about 4.5 years, our high school lost nearly 13 people, 13 students, either recent graduates or actual students at the school, over a 4-year period. 13 died. And of those 13, one of them died of natural causes, died of cancer. All the rest were some sort of accidents, and all but one of the other ones was a traffic fatality in a small town of 2,000 people. 230 kids in a high school, and in 4 years, 13 of them have died. We also lost a high school counselor, and to this day, there are still deaths. It doesn't have quite the frequency that happened when I was in high school, but it does, like, every year or so. There seems to be a young person or a family or someone who dies unexpectedly and rather quickly in such a small town. I don't live there anymore, but I have always felt that if there was a town that had some sort of darkness or curse to it, I've always kind of felt like my hometown was like that. And so listening to this particular story, listening to I-4, and hearing that, something dark had happened a long time ago. Nobody made a deal with the devil or anything like that, but just bad stuff happened there. People died, they were buried, and then time moved on. Time forgot about them. It made me think back to my small town, and it made me wonder, is there something to that? Is there something about this town that I don't know, claims the lives of young people at a rapid rate? And maybe there's something in that psychologically we want to make sense. I was in my formative years when I was watching friends die. One of them died. I'll never forget the first one. This particular child was 16, has his license for a while, had gone out to his family farm to check on something. His car hydroplaned, and he crossed the median and hit a car head on. I found out as myself and about 20 other kids were returning from a school trip on a rainy Saturday, and we pulled up to the school, and there waiting for us was 20 or 30 parents to let us know that this young man named Lynn had passed away. I remember that one. I remember another one where there was an accident in literally about 50 yards from where I was. A car had been driving at an incredibly high rate of speed, had hit another car at a stoplight, ran up on the elevated steps of downtown, while myself and probably about 50 other kids were hanging out at an after football game fellowship at the local church. One of those people in that car had been a classmate of mine. I remember wanting to make sense of things, and I remembered wanting to have an explanation. And yeah, I was a kid who read horror books, and I liked scary things, and maybe that was my answer, was to say, well, what if my hometown is cursed? What if I'm living in the Texas version of Derry, Maine? What if that's the thing that there's something that wants to take lives here? And to a rationally minded person who can pull themselves back, of course, no, it's just a lot of coincidence. It's a lot of really dark and bad coincidence, but that's all it is that things just happen. And people looking at I-4 in Florida go, man, it's just, people drive too fast. There's construction. There's lots of different reasons why bad things can happen there that have nothing to do with ghosts or demons or ghouls or satanic clowns or anything like that. It's just bad luck. But I think that sometimes even the most rational human being will ask some strange questions. They'll be confronted with evidence, they'll be confronted with things, and they will say, I know that it just makes sense in a natural way. I know that it just makes sense that I-4 is dangerous because bad construction and traffic violations and all those kind of things, but I don't know if that makes it better. Maybe we look to the supernatural to explain things because at our core, we don't want to believe that things are that random. It's easier for us to believe that some malevolent presence is taking lives for some dark purpose than it is for us to believe that through no fault of our own, through no evil intent, you're gone. Like that. I mean, you have no control over that. You can't fight that. You can't stop that. And maybe that's even more terrifying than, a horned devil chasing us down, or a evil spirit, or a poltergeist that shakes our beds at night, or vengeful spirits not resting peacefully beneath layers and layers of asphalt and concrete as we speed over them on our way to see Mickey and Minnie and Donald and Goofy and the whole gang. I don't know. I don't know if I believe that some places are evil because it's a coping mechanism for myself. I don't know if I believe that there is evil because it takes some of the guilt away from my own actions. I don't know. Maybe that's all it is. Maybe society has come up with urban legends not just to teach us morality, to teach us to slow down on I-4, you might die in the dead zone. Maybe we don't just come up with urban legends for that. Maybe we come up with urban legends because they are a psychological blanket, like we had when we were a kid. A contact comfort. Bad things happen because bad things exist. So is it, in the end, easier for us to believe that I-4 is haunted by long dead souls buried beneath its blacktop? Maybe. Maybe it's easier for us to buy into that. Maybe it's true. Maybe we are not alone in this world, and there are things that have been around far longer than us and will be around far longer than us. Or maybe we'll join them someday too. I don't have those answers. What I do know is that the next time I am driving across the panhandle of Florida, rather the bottom part of Florida where I-4 exists, maybe when I'm going to Disney, I'm gonna pay attention. I'm going to keep an eye out. And at the end of the day, if the goal of the I-4 urban legend, the dead zone, the fields of the dead, is to make you slow down and pay attention, then it's doing its job. But if, maybe, just maybe, there is something supernatural about it, well, then I got to pay real close attention when I cross into Disneyland. I hope you've enjoyed this sort of introspective version of Urban Legends Unmasked. And again, like I said, there's lots and lots of legends in Florida, so there's a very good chance that before all things are said and done, we will be back to visit Florida and check out some other dark legends. But if you're out there and you're driving I-4, be careful. Watch yourself. Maybe pop on an audiobook, which, by the way, I happen to have a couple of. You can listen to Toxic, my book on American Christianity on Audible, as well as Kill Town, my horror slasher novel, both of which I narrate. One of them has me doing voices, which you may or may not appreciate, and the other one is just me talking. That would be Toxic. So feel free to check those out. But if you are the passenger in the car on I-4 and you trust your driver, why don't you pick up one of the other books there? All of mine are listed on Amazon. Feel free to check those out there. And also, I hope you have a great week. We will be back next time with some more Urban Legends Unmasked. And until then, I'm your host, Chad Lehrman.